Hi everyone, I'm Brian Strausser, chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and I'm here because Ben Dorr of Minnesota Gun Rights has made yet another video about us. In this video, he calls us evil, anti-Christian, pro-abortion, open borders, leftist degenerates. He does all of this while pretending that he is the one leading the Second Amendment fight here in Minnesota. So in this video, I'm going to set the record straight. With Rob Dorr in my role as chair, I lead the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and we're the only organization in the state that actually wins and that actually litigates and wins battles in court, that stops gun control and passes pro-gun bills at the state legislature and delivers real results for gun owners in every corner of our state here in Minnesota. The Dorrs, Ben's not a serious advocate. He's not at the state capitol. He hasn't testified in a single hearing this year. They're ineffective outrage artists who have been misleading gun owners, legislators, and the public for years here in Minnesota and in the more than a dozen other states where they operate. So let's break this down in this video today.
You know, in the fight for the Second Amendment and really for the soul of our country, we keep using this phrase and hearing this phrase from gun owners, and it goes like this. This is not simply a political fight. This is a fight of good versus evil.
Yeah, look, this is how he starts the video, and this is the entire framing of this video about Minnesota gun rights and the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. He describes this as a battle of good versus evil. So I want to be clear here that politics is not a Marvel movie the way Ben is making this out to be. This is real life policy work and real life politics in St. Paul and around the state. And when you're calling fellow pro Second Amendment advocates like Rob and I and the members and supporters of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus that we're evil because we don't bow to your outrage mafia actions machine that you're running at Minnesota Gun Rights, that's not righteous behavior. It's completely delusional about how the fight actually works. Let's go on.
About the right and the wrong, the good versus evil in Minnesota gun politics. And today, again, we're talking about the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus.
So Ben does this a lot because he thinks it's effective. He describes us as the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus as if somehow we are taking direction from Democrats or what have you. The organization's name is the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. That's who we are. But Ben engages in these childish elementary school games thinking that this makes him look more serious. But this is also part of their business model. Attacking the existing pro-gun groups is what they do in every single state where they operate. And it's no different here in Minnesota. It's not any different than what they do in Iowa, New York, Ohio, the list goes on. Let's keep looking.
The Brian Strausser, gun owners call him Fester. Don't ask me why, but they do. And you have Lazy Rob, who's their lobbyist at the Capitol. And this.
So let's talk about this for a moment, because Ben using names like this is something that Minnesota Gun Rights and their sister organizations do in every single state. But I'll just boil this down to something simple. If you have ever met Rob Dorr, if you've ever met Rob, there is no way you would call the man lazy. Rob works for us full-time here at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. He works tirelessly and more hours than anybody else does. And he's the caucus's only full-time employee. I'm just a volunteer here. Rob also has done this while going to law school full-time and holding down an internship that has him in court multiple days a week as a part of his law school training. So calling Rob lazy is not only inaccurate, it's incredibly off the mark for the level of work and the amount of work that Rob does. Let's keep watching.
Entire session long, we at MGR have been lobbing bombs, political bombs, so to speak, at the politicians at the Capitol to stop gun control, their assault weapons ban, a whole plethora of other bills, and push pro-gun bills like Stand Your Ground and bills to remove the duty to retreat.
So let's talk about this for just a minute. What the Dorrs do is what Ben is claiming that he's doing. This is pure theater. There is zero actual policy work happening here. What we've been doing at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is meeting with legislators, testifying and hearings, submitting written testimony, writing bills, tracking votes, scoring votes. We don't need to throw bombs because we're actually in the room doing the work. Ben claims that they have been pushing for bills like Stand Your Ground and to remove the duty to retreat. The duty to retreat this year was in House File 13. HF 13. The chief author was Representative Matt Bliss. Now, we worked with Representative Bliss on HF 13 from the very beginning, starting with what the language needs to be to do this right, to getting this through committees where we testified. They weren't there. We were there testifying in favor of moving these bills forward. We helped the Republicans prepare for the floor debate. The night before HF 13 came to the floor, Ben Dorr and Minnesota Gun Rights put out a video saying our signature piece of legislation that we've been working on all year is coming to the floor. And you can help make that happen by donating, by signing this petition, by taking these actions, whatever it was exactly that they said. The House file was authored by Representative Matt Bliss. Representative Matt Bliss didn't even have a single conversation with MGR this year, has never had a conversation with Ben Dorr about moving this legislation forward. MGR just swooped in the night before and said, hey, our signature bill's moving forward, and encouraged everyone to go out and try to pass that bill. All of the hard work to get that done was done by Representative Bliss and the members and supporters and the leadership here at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. MGR hasn't been at a single committee hearing all year long. They haven't testified for anything all year long. And they didn't say a word about these bills in committee. They only started talking about it the night before the bill came to the House floor. That's not leadership. That's not being involved in the process. It's pure theater preying on low information voters. Let's keep watching.
And this entire session long, Strasser has been attacking Minnesota gun rights. And I'd like to say that I'm surprised by that. And if you're a gun owner, you might be asking yourselves, why would two gun groups be fighting amongst each other? Well,
it's a great question because we work closely with groups like the Firearms Policy Coalition and the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms. We work with Gun Owners of America. We work with the National Association of Gun Rights. We work with California Rifle and Pistol Association on litigation issues. We've done a lot of work with a lot of other associations. There are allies that we trust and we work with because we have a common goal. And that goal is preserving, defending, and restoring the right to keep and bear arms, the Second Amendment right that all peaceable Minnesotans have. And we're engaged in collaborative efforts to do that all the time. Minnesota Gun Rights, when they came here 12 years ago, they started off by attacking the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus and the other group that was active at the time, the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance. They did this by sending an email to their Iowa affiliate, Iowa Gun Owners, another part of their business empire, saying that these two organizations were compromised. And that's why they needed to launch Minnesota Gun Rights as a no compromise organization here for the Second Amendment. And they have made video after video after video and even run paid ads, as they're doing right now today as I'm filming this video, against the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. They're positioning this video as if we're starting this attack, and that is not true. This has been going on for a dozen years, and it's probably been a mistake of ours not to speak out about this more clearly a long time ago. But we're not going to take any of this lying down anymore. Let's keep going because it's about to really run off the rails here.
The answer to that is very, very simple. The answer is because we at Minnesota Gun Rights are traditional, patriotic, conservative, Christian gun owners who want to see our country restored, our Second Amendment respected, protected, and advanced, and we want God back in our schools. We want trannies out of our bathrooms. We want normalcy to return to our country. That's what we want. And we work on those ends by advancing the Second Amendment, keeping tyrants at bay, and stopping these people from gutting our Second Amendment freedoms. That's who we are. We're unapologetic about it.
So I'm going to stop here for a second and make a very clear statement that you've heard me say before. And that statement is quite simple. The Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is a single issue, nonpartisan organization. The only battles we're going to get involved in are about the Second Amendment, about the right of peaceable Minnesotans to keep and bear arms for the purposes of self-defense, to defend your family, to defend your community, to defend against tyranny. That is the reason we have a Second Amendment, and we're never going to stop fighting for that. Mr. Dorr here lists a whole bunch of other things, his personal opinions, his personal political stances, and makes it clear that his organization is only about people who believe in those things. That's fine. That's his organization. That's not who we're going to be. We are here as a single issue organization, because that's what makes us effective and credible, is we're here for one fight and one fight alone, and that is to defend and restore the right to keep and bear arms here in Minnesota. That's it. And everyone deserves that right, because the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms, is for everyone. It's not just for conservative Christian men who believe in the things that Ben believes in. We're here because we're a single issue organization, and that right to keep and bear arms is for everyone. Let's keep watching.
What we've been fighting for in Minnesota for a decade, over a decade now. It's been almost 12 years. But at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, so you could say that the members and supporters of Minnesota gun rights are the good in this situation. On the other side, you have the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and they are the evil, because they are leftists.
Now, this is quite fascinating that he's showing this picture, because this photo is from one of our lobby days a few years ago. That's me at the podium in the press room at the state capitol. That's a place Ben Dorr has never stood before. There's Rob next to me who's going to talk. In the background here are a number of different guys. There's actually several people in the broader photo. He's not showing those. But these are some of our members and supporters who are just as conservative and pro-gun Republican as Ben is, and he's calling them a bunch of leftist evil people. I mean, that's just ridiculous. That's not even close to being true. Let's keep going.
Open borders, never Trumpers who hate Christians, are openly pro-abortion, pro-LGBT, the whole thing. They are leftists through and through and through. Watch.
Look, that's really a fascinating statement, and it demonstrates that Ben either doesn't know me at all or know Rob, or is just flat out lying about our politics. So let me address a couple of these. First, none of these statements that he is saying have anything to do with the Second Amendment, right? That's the only thing that we're here for. But he describes us as leftist, open border, never Trumpers who hate Christians and are openly pro-abortion and pro-LGBT. So look, I'm going to speak for myself for just a moment. And again, this is not the caucus's position. This is me talking to you as an individual who's been involved in Republican politics in Minnesota since I moved here in 2005. Ben claims I'm a leftist. I've been a Republican my entire adult life. I was a Republican state delegate here in Minnesota multiple times, representing my BPOU here in Ramsey County. So I don't believe in leftist politics. I don't believe in the story and the platform that the Minnesota DFL is trying to sell you. He claims I'm for open borders. Well, I don't believe that you have a country if you don't have a border. And I believe that people who entered this country illegally should be deported or should leave. So these are not at all my political beliefs. Ben claims that I hate Christians, that we hate Christians. I was raised and baptized and confirmed as a Methodist because that was the church of my parents growing up in Indiana. I converted to Catholicism to marry my wife. I go to Mass on a weekly basis. My children go to the Catholic parish school, and they will continue to Catholic high school in the next year, because we took a look at the public school system and said, we don't want that. We want our children to have a good Catholic education that's going to give them a better education and a better set of ethics and morals without all of this other meddling. So wherever he gets this anti-Christian leftist open border crap, it's completely false. I think he also goes on and claims I'm pro-abortion. It's fascinating. I'm Catholic. I'm not. My wife and I had children later in life, having potentially challenging genetic issues increase as you get older. My wife and I decided that no matter what happened, we were not going to pursue that as an option, that we felt obligated, because we're pro-life, to raise our children no matter what God may have given us. And fortunately, we were fortunate to have two very healthy young daughters that are now driving us nuts as teenagers. So Ben's doing this because he wants you to think that MGR is the good and the caucus is completely evil. And he does this by lying about my personal political beliefs, my stances, my history. And again, none of this has to do with the Second Amendment, but I wanted to show you how he lies in order to position the organization that he runs as the answer to the Second Amendment here in Minnesota. Let's keep watching.
It's well known. Many people know this. They hate Minnesota gun rights because we are not like them, because we are like you.
Actually, and this is another ridiculous statement trying to divide the Second Amendment community. I don't hate Ben. I'm a Christian man who believes in forgiveness and redemption, but I don't like Ben, and I don't like Ben's tactics. But we call Ben out not because he's different than us or has a different approach than we do. We call out Ben and Minnesota gun rights because they lie. They lie to gun owners. They lie about Rob and I. They lie about legislators and their positions. Their role is, as MGR, is to inflame division. And they're an organization that hasn't delivered a single legislative win or a single court win in their entire existence here in Minnesota. So we don't hate them and we don't hate their members and supporters because we're different. We dislike their approach. We call them out because they're liars, because they're not honest to you about what is going on in the Second Amendment movement in Minnesota. Let's keep watching.
And somehow they pretend to be pro-gun while being leftists on everything else.
This is a completely wacky statement, and I want to address this for a minute. They claim we pretend to be pro-gun. It's a ridiculous statement. I've been pro-gun my entire life. The organization, if you just look at what we do at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, it's clear where we stand on the Second Amendment. We sued Keith Ellison, for God's sake, to obtain the right to carry for 18 to 20-year-olds, a lawsuit that took 4 years to get to the end. And we just won this in front of the United States Supreme Court. We beat Keith Ellison at every single step of the way. We sued Tim Walz and Keith Ellison recently over this omnibus bill that they passed, they rotted through at the end of last session, that contained a binary trigger ban. The first hearing in that case is next week. We have filed multiple amicus briefs on multiple Second Amendment cases. We have called out legislators. We have beaten legislators. We continue to fight for you and the Second Amendment. I'm not sure where you get off saying we're pretending to be pro-gun. That is one of the more ridiculous statements in this entire video. But let's keep watching. It gets better.
Somehow they pretend to be pro-gun while being leftists on everything else. And that's called muddying the waters right there. We don't believe in doing that. We are not a big tent organization. If you let the enemy participate in your politics, what you get is a cause that is taken over and destroyed by those very same enemies. And that's what the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is doing. And they've been doing it for a very long time.
So I want to be clear here. I don't really care how Ben runs his organization. I don't care if he chooses to exclude people that don't believe in his version of Christianity. But the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is a single issue organization. I don't care what your political party is. I don't care what your political beliefs are. I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what country you came from. I don't care if you're straight or gay or lesbian. I don't care if you're bi. I don't care about any of those things. What I care about is that you believe in the Second Amendment. Because again, the Second Amendment is for everyone. The right to keep and bear arms for peaceable Minnesotans is for everybody. There's no delineation here that it's only for Christian men who believe as Ben believes. That's not who we are as an organization. That's not who we're going to be as an organization. Let's keep watching.
What set this in motion? Let's just talk about this for a moment. We did an email, a wonderful email, I might add, a very nice email, to you guys, our members and supporters, to oppose the bans on guns that have been introduced and are being pushed in the state capitol.
So before we get to Ben's explanation about this, let me give you the facts. The email from Minnesota Gun Rights said that the battle over the so-called assault weapons ban in St. Paul was heating up, and that they needed you to give to them in order to help stop this legislation. The truth is, this bill has never been moving from the day that it was introduced, because it did not have support, because we killed it off, because DFL leadership didn't want to try to tackle this in 2025, so that it wasn't a priority for them. It also wasn't moving because the Republicans have tied the Minnesota House, and there's only a 1-vote majority now in the Minnesota Senate for the DFL. They didn't have the votes to move the bill. The bill isn't moving. It also wasn't heard before committee deadline, although yes, committee deadlines can be waived. But this bill's not moving. There's no interest in moving this bill in 2025. But MGR's communication was, the battle is heating up and you need to contribute. You need to help us stop this bill. And that's just bullshit. It's bullshit because that's not what is actually happening. Now, we know that here at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus because we're down in St. Paul and because we talked with almost every legislator about what was going on and what bills were moving and what bills did they see moving. And this bill is not on that radar. In fact, there's no gun control bills that we expect to see any action in this legislative year. Next year might be a different story. So we're going to tell you the truth when these things happen. We're not going to use this to fundraise, which is what the Dorrs are doing. But I want you to watch how they're going to manipulate what I just told you and what we put out to our members and supporters to understand how they play this game.
And of course, we want to stop all of these bills. And I won't belabor the point too far because there's a lot of nuance in the bills now. They're not introducing some of their traditional bills. They're making them better, right? They want to pass an assault weapons ban that grandfathers in the ones that...
So Ben's trying to tell you that these bills are really nuanced and things are different, but the reality is that's all also bullshit. This is the exact same assault weapons ban bill from Senator McEwen in the Senate, and there's a House version of this as well. This is the exact same bill that was introduced last year in the previous legislative session. There's nothing different about this bill. The grandfathering aspects that he's explaining here, they were in the bill in the 2023-2024 version. Nothing's different. Nothing's changed here. But he's trying to mislead you by telling you that something is different, that this is somehow different than before. And because of that, we're wrong and he's right. Keep watching.
You already own, but makes it illegal to buy, sell, trade, give any of those firearms away in the future. So it is a ban nonetheless. So the left is playing all sorts of trickery and games to try to get their bills passed, and we are opposing them. And the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is so stupid as to pretend like we're totally out of hot water. No problems. This bill's dead. It's not going anywhere. Blah, blah.
That's not what we said. They're claiming here that we are saying the bills are dead, and so you should stop fighting. That is not at all true. We will never once tell you to not stop fighting, right? Your freedom is always at risk if the legislature is in session, because they can do crazy shit. So we never say stop fighting. What we're saying, though, is stop lying. Stop lying, Ben. Because when a bill is dead, when a bill is not moving, pretending that it's not, pretending that the battle is heating up, and telling your supporters that you need them to give to you in order to stop this legislation is flat out dishonest. And it misleads the very people that he is claiming to be helping in these kinds of communications. Let's keep watching.
Games to try to get their bills passed, and we are opposing them. And the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is so stupid as to pretend like we're totally out of hot water. No problems. This bill's dead. It's not going anywhere. Blah, 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 blah. MGR's using alarmist rhetoric. Well, let's just put this in perspective. We all saw what happened in Michigan.
No, that's not what we're saying. We never once said to stop fighting. Remember that. We never tell you to stop fighting. Your liberty is not free. Your liberty continues to be at risk if the legislature is in session. That's the truth of what's going on. They're just using this bill, these false claims about this bill, to stoke outrage. Now he's going to talk about Michigan a little bit, so let's watch this.
One guy with a gun went on Michigan campus, I think it was MSU, and shot a bunch of people. And literally, overnight, Michigan went from, we're doing okay, no problems, to passing red flag gun confiscations, universal background checks, mandated firearms lockups, gun storage laws, and a whole bunch more got passed in Michigan because of one moment in time.
Let's talk about Michigan for just a moment. The Minnesota gun rights also is a part of a larger group of organizations called the American Firearms Association, and that is run by the Dorrs. And they have a group in Michigan that has been in place all this time. All this time, they've had a Michigan affiliate, and all of these bills were passed while they were in place. So the Dorrs' antics and tactics didn't stop any of these bills from advancing in Michigan. They all passed. The Dorrs weren't able to stop them because they have no actual political influence. Not in Minnesota, not in Michigan, not in any of these other states in which they operate. That winning like that is just not in the cards for them. Let's keep watching.
One thing that Minnesota Gun Rights has proven is that if you keep your feet on the gas, you can stop the bad stuff. If you take your feet off, like the Gun Owners Caucus likes to do, and go, it's all good, ain't nothing gonna pass, there's no problems up here, these guys are just being alarmist, what you're going to get is a bad moment in time. And now gun control is on the agenda. It's at the top of the list. And we're going to get gun control bills passed in Minnesota again.
I find this comical because, again, this is claiming that we just stop fighting because this bill isn't advancing, and that's completely false. We've been at the Capitol fighting every day, and in court, and with the Department of Public Safety on reciprocity, and with an upcoming lawsuit that has a hearing next week. This is all bullshit coming from Ben because he wants to position MGR as the group that is fighting, the good group, and the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus as evil, saying that we're just throwing in the towel. The legislative session isn't over. It's not over for about another 10 days. There's a lot of fighting left to do, and there's a lot of sneakiness to make sure it doesn't happen like we've seen in previous legislative session. So he's making up these falsehoods again about what we are and are not doing in order to make himself look better. Let's keep watching.
And we outed a bunch of anti-gun politicians for exactly what they are. See, what the Gun Owners Caucus has not figured out yet is if you start preparing for battle, for political battle, when the enemy is at the gates, you don't have enough time. You can't win that way. You have to lay the groundwork and prepare in advance if you're going to win.
So this is an interesting statement because we actually agree with Ben here. The time to raise money and build your war chest and build an effective organization is long before the battle that you actually have to fight. That's why we keep fundraising. That's why we've worked to grow our membership year over year. It's why we work to grow the number of Second Amendment defenders we have here at the Gun Owners Caucus. The reason we do this, I can tell you exactly where this comes from. It was long before Ben Dorr even came to Minnesota. It was when I was sitting as a then volunteer with the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance, and we were sitting watching basically 2.5 to 3 weeks straight of gun control hearings in the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate in the session following the Sandy Hook tragedy, where DFL-controlled committees heard every gun control proposal known to man, right? We heard magazine limits of 7. We heard bans on body armor. We saw a law that would have required the law enforcement to inspect your home without a warrant every year to make sure that you had safe storage for semi-automatic rifles. There was a lot of crazy stuff that went on. And what I took away from that as an activist that was getting more and more involved is that this hearing would have looked a lot different if that committee table was filled with all of our friends that were pro-Second Amendment instead of being filled with a bunch of anti-gun DFLers. The Minnesota Gun Owners Political Action Committee came out of that lesson that year, watching that committee hearing. And the caucus came on later as the leaders of the Gun Owners Civil Rights Alliance started talking about retirement. We built the caucus from the beginnings of those organizations. And we've built this into a pretty fearsome political force here in Minnesota that wins in the courts, that wins in the legislature, that wins around the state, and isn't going to stop fighting. So I agree with Ben. You need to raise money, and you need to be prepared way in advance of this battle, not throw in the towel like he's claiming that we're doing. Let's keep watching.
And so this is our chance to lay the groundwork and prepare for the next major fight that's coming at us. Could be 2026, could be 2027 after the midterm elections. The Democrats could take the Minnesota House back. They could expand their majority in the Minnesota Senate. These things are possible. And if we sit on our thumbs and go, it's all fine, it's all fine, there's no gun control bills are passing, Minnesota gun rights is being alarmist.
What Minnesota gun rights is doing is lying to you. It's not that they're being alarmist. Again, they're claiming that this ban on commonly owned firearms, that the battle over this is heating up in St. Paul, and none of that is true. That is not what is happening. But again, Ben and I agree here that you don't take your foot off the gas. You don't stop fighting, and we never said to stop fighting. What we said is that they were lying about what was going on, and that they were lying in order to raise money. That's not something that we're going to do here at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Let's keep watching.
Could be 2026, could be 2027 after the midterm elections. The Democrats could take the Minnesota House back. They could expand their majority in the Minnesota Senate. These things are possible. And if we sit on our thumbs and go, it's all fine, it's all fine, there's no gun control bills are passing, Minnesota gun rights is being alarmist. What you're doing, morons at the Gun Owners Caucus, what you're doing is not laying the groundwork necessary to win these battles when they are truly and clearly upon us.
Again, so and I went a little farther back than I intended to there. Clearly, we're not saying to stop fighting. He keeps claiming and claiming over and over and over again that we're stopping fighting, and none of this is true. You are not safe while the legislature is in session. That's why we don't stop fighting. That's why we keep building our war chest. Let's keep watching.
As I said at the beginning of this is a battle of good versus evil. In states all across the country, Minnesota, the Dorr brothers work with other gun groups on Second Amendment issues, and we advance the cause together. We've had wonderful, wonderful relationships with other gun groups.
Bullshit. That's total bullshit. The Dorr brothers do not work with the NRA. They do not work with the National Association for Gun Rights. They do not work with the Buckeye Firearms Association in Ohio. They attack them in the same way that they have attacked us. They even went into the state of New York and attacked the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. Now, we know the folks at the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association because they brought the Bruin case that solidified the right to carry for all Americans in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin before the United States Supreme Court. But that wasn't good enough for the Dorrs. They started a similar affiliate as Minnesota Gun Rights in New York because they paint the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association as the enemy, as good versus evil. Dorrs, good. Everyone else is evil. I don't know any credible gun rights group that works with the Dorr brothers. Perhaps there's some obscure group in some states, or maybe there's a puppet group that the Dorrs created so they could say they were working with anybody. When I go to the Gun Rights Policy Conference every year, where the Second Amendment Foundation and the Citizens Committee for the Right to Keep and Bear Arms brings all of the state associations together, all of the credible organizations together, the Dorr brothers are not there. And when I talk to my colleagues, my counterparts, the chairman and the presidents and the executive directors at other state organizations, and Rob, who goes there with me, does the same, what they ask is, how do we stop the Dorrs from attacking our organizations? How do we get the Dorrs out of the way so that we can focus on doing good Second Amendment advocacy rather than having to fight against their incursion by attacking us and tearing down what we have built in terms of a Second Amendment movement in these states? Are the Dorrs working with other state associations? No. Let's keep watching.
Hate him, and they hate you. They hate traditional conservatives. They hate Christians. They hate blue-collar people. They hate normalcy. They love abortion and open borders and left-wing policy and fiscal liberalism. It's all over their feeds, guys.
This is really comical, and when my father watches this video, he's going to be extremely upset with Ben's statement. So look, I grew up in a small town in rural Indiana where we were a block from a trailer park because we didn't have much. My parents were blue-collar workers. My dad was a railroad engineer and later the local Teamsters president. And later on became a Teamsters regional officer. My mom was a public health nurse. And prior to that, she was a nurse for the Veterans Administration Hospital in Danville, Illinois. I grew up without a lot. And I'm the first member of my family to ever go to college. So it's interesting to me that Ben chooses to say, and lie, by the way, that I hate blue-collar folks, because that's my family. That's how I grew up. That's how my wife grew up, in the same vein. She's just from here in Minnesota. So I've addressed the other issues that Ben brought up here. That's not who I am. That's how Ben wants to position me in order to continue this narrative of good versus evil. It's simply not true. And it's not who I am or how I represent myself or how I was raised by my blue-collar parents. I mean, for God's sake, my brother is a journeyman pipe fitter. He welds. That's what he chose as a career. He has made a very good life for himself and his daughter. If I hate blue collar people, then I hate my family, and I hate my wife's family, and I hate my neighbors, and none of that is true. But Ben wants you to think that because he wants to make this about good versus evil in order to build his business model for Minnesota gun rights. Let's keep watching.
States that my brothers and I work in, advancing the Second Amendment, stopping gun control. We're doing great things in Missouri right now, by the way. It's phenomenal. I might do a whole video on that a little later. If we get the bill across the line, it's very close. I have never seen a gun group that was headed up by degenerate leftists the way that the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus is.
We're back to being
every
leftists.
gun group in America that we work with, it's about your same cast of characters, right? But in Minnesota, I've never seen it before, but these leftists who are fighting so hard to destroy traditional America, patriotic America, who are pretending to be pro-gun on top of it all.
I love the pretending to be pro-gun, as if anyone can point at anything in my record or Rob's record where we've ever supported gun control. We're pretending to be pro-gun while kicking Keith Ellison's ass in court. Really? That's really a stretch, buddy. Let's keep watching.
So this will continue. We will continue to do our jobs, advance the Second Amendment. We're going to stop all the gun control bills in 2025 unless something terrible happens, which I pray it does not. And we're gonna lay the groundwork, build up the war chest, fundraise for 2026, the 2026 elections, everything that's coming at us. We've got a reprieve right now, but it is a reprieve. And if the degenerate leftists who run the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, if these never-Trumper, anti-Christian, Christ-hating, open border, LGBT abortionists who love degeneracy in all its forms, if they want to keep doing what they're doing, you go right ahead. We're going to keep rocking and rolling.
I will never use faith as a political weapon. I just think that should be beneath everybody. We respect our members' values. That's the bottom line, because the Second Amendment is for everyone. The right to keep and bear arms is for all people. And we're going to fight to protect everyone's rights. That's real leadership. That is staying focused on being a single issue organization. And I don't know what kind of degeneracy he believes I support. Drinking bourbon and cigars is my major vice in life. I don't believe in the sort of degeneracy that Ben claims that I do here. I do want to point out one other thing in the video that we happen to notice. And so I want to, we're going to jump back a little bit in the video. And I'm going to show this to you real quick. All right. There's a portion in the video here where Ben is driving through a small town, and we noticed, Rob and I, in the background, that there were a number of businesses that you see right here. It didn't take us long to figure out where Ben was at, and it's quite comical because Ben's got this whole video about Minnesota and Minnesota this and Minnesota that and what they're doing. And I have to tell you, it takes a lot of balls to talk about how hard you're fighting in Minnesota in the final days of session while you're driving through northern Indiana, because that's where he is in this video. He's not in Minnesota doing anything in Minnesota. He's cruising through a small town in northern Indiana. And you can see here on the maps and such that we posted exactly the businesses that Ben was driving by. That's what he was doing, was cruising through northern Indiana, bashing the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. That really takes balls. That's the end of our reaction video here about this little ditty that Ben made about my degeneracy, I guess. But here's the bottom line. The Dorr brothers attack groups like ours and the Buckeye Firearms Association and the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association and all of the other state organizations that are doing good work throughout the United States because they can't win. They don't pass bills. They don't file and win lawsuits, and they sure as the hell don't speak for the thousands of peaceable Minnesota gun owners that are working with us and standing with us every day across Minnesota. We don't answer to outrage artists. We answer to results, and our results are pretty clear. And we're just getting started. Thanks for your time. I'm sorry that I had to go out and make a video like this, but these are allegations that we need to answer, and we need to make sure that we're pushing back and telling you the truth as our members and supporters of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus.